Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, October 24th, 2023 Appoquinimink School District Board of Education meeting. We're primarily meeting tonight to go over the capital and operational referendum. We're going to start this meeting the way we start all our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Always want to go right into the Girl Scout pledge after. Dr. Burrows, are there any adjustments to the agenda?
There's one adjustment to the agenda under established meeting dates. We have a board meeting scheduled for Friday, November 3rd at noon, and it'll be held here in the boardroom.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll start with new business, and the first item is the FY23 Major Capital Bond for approval. Mr. Loftus.
So this is a bit of cleanup from the previous budget year. I'll just explain real briefly. The document that I'm asking the board to vote on and to sign, in the preliminary budget back in July of 22, that was coming out of the Reading referendum where we had, the state had bonded the Reading renovation project, and it was the final year of the Crystal Run elementary school project. And so what we did during the preliminary budget in July of 22 is we submitted a bond anticipation notice request to the state, and the board had voted to approve the bond anticipation notice. Then what happened was the state went on the open market and they finally sold that debt, and we now have a bond. And so this is from that school year, so the 22-23 school year. And the document in front of you is just stating that we're now going to be officially paying on a bond for the next 20 years for the $14,966,700 that we voted on about 15, 16 months ago. So are there any questions about that?
So the motion is to approve the bond that we already approved?
So at the time, we voted on a bond anticipation note, and the state requires that the board now vote because it's now officially a bond. So the options are we either vote to go ahead and move forward with the bond, or the state will say, well, you have the option of just paying off the $14 million, which I advise we bond it. So I need a motion to approve the bonds and then to a vote and then a signature or signatures on the bond.
And for the record, too, the bond anticipation note was read.
That's correct. That's correct.
I'll make a motion that the school district enter into school building bond as presented and in replacement of the bond anticipation note that we agreed to last year to reflect the fact that a bond has now been issued.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Forston and a second by Ms. DeWitt to approve the bond note as presented. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on this motion? Hearing none, all those in favor vote by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then I have to sign it. No, that's not you. Moving on in the agenda, the 2023 Capital Operational Referendum for Approval. Dr. Burrows.
All right, good evening. So this is the third time that we've presented this material to you. Now there's some new information in this material. The first part, and we'll get into that first. The first part of this, so tonight we'll go over the capital request, our operational request, and then we have the referendum model if there's still questions on that, and I have some samples of that model. So updated overview of our capital request. If you remember, our initial request was $413 million on the capital side. We have gotten preliminary confirmation from the Department of Education that we're going to be approved for a construction of a new middle and high school on the Summit campus and a construction of an elementary school on Green Giant Road. The total cost of that is just under $289 million. Our bonding part of that would be almost 66.5 on the 20-year bond of that. We would need to look to increase the capital side or our debt service tax an additional 3 cents for that. One of the projects that's been on our CN request every time we've submitted since 2016 has been for a bus parking lot at Alfred G. Waters. That was not approved. If we were to go forward with that, that would be 100% locally bonded, need to be 100% locally bonded, which would be a second question on the capital portion of the ballot, which would represent a 1 cent ask if we decide to go forward with that. So I'm going to stop here to allow for any discussion or any questions or anything on this piece of it.
Is there any further information from Dover as to why these projects were chosen as opposed to not all of the projects or other projects that we proposed, just for transparency to the public?
Sure. So we put priority order in on our projects. Priority 1 and in essence 2 was the high school and middle school. So 1A and 1B, if you want to say it that way. And then our priority 2 was an early childhood center on that campus to complete the campus. They decided to fund priority 3, which was the new elementary school on Green Giant Road. They had other projects they were funding at this time that they decided to fund this year outside of our other projects. They said we could resubmit next year our projects. Now, just a little history in that.
They said we could resubmit?
Yeah, we could resubmit next year for the projects we didn't get approved for this year. Just as I mentioned before, the previous year they didn't approve any projects. And then this year they gave DOE a target of 224 million. And I think I've gone through previously how much, 140 of that was already spoken for and previously funded approvals, one of those being Reading Middle School for us. And then there's other things that go into that, like minor cap. There's also the safety and security money, which is 9 million. And then there was market pressure money at like 19 million. They came back after the latest DFACT, which was less revenue than was projected at the previous DFACT, and they reduced the number to 195 million, which 195 or 197. I can't remember the exact number. It must have been 197 because it reduced what they could bond $28 million. So some of our stuff got crowded out in that move.
On the capital numbers, 2 things. First, I guess if we want to do a 100% locally funded capital project, which would be the Alfred G. Waters bus lot, is that why you're thinking or you're saying we would have 2 different questions on the capital side?
Yes.
And the numbers for the 3 schools that they did agree to fund, man, that's a big number. 288 million for 3 schools essentially, and the one school shares, just like Odessa and Cantwell's Bridge, I assume they will share some common facilities.
Yes.
We're still spending close to $300 million for 3 schools, which 10 years ago never would have happened. Does this reflect their current funding formula, or does this also include, because we know what's going to happen. I mean, we know their funding formula is incomplete and doesn't take into account inflation, or does this new formula take into account the last couple years of inflation?
So this past year on the square footage formula, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they increased it 20%. It went up 20%. They're trying to catch up to what's going on currently. And also this reflects a 5% increase because it's escalation. Thank you for the 5% escalation.
Just one-time 5%, or is it like 5% then 1%, or?
It's 5% each year, but not compounded. So the first year, 5%.
Okay, well, that's helpful. That's good to know. And then I know that, we want to build this new elementary school because we need a new elementary school. But part of our plan was, once we got the new elementary school first constructed, then we would take down, much as I love the historic nature of the building, it's a great school, but we would take down existing Townsend Elementary and replace it with a new state-of-the-art facility. And while that was happening, those kids would be off at the new school. Does that still work with this
Well, they
timing or
didn't
schedule?
approve Townsend,
Right.
but it would still work if we went back next year and they approved it next year.
So maybe hopefully someone from DOE and OMB is watching. Yeah, we need to, obviously, it only really works for us if we can do that. And I actually think it's good fiscal management and policy. So hopefully they will commit next year to Townsend Elementary School. Those are my questions.
Bonded bus lot, will that take care of the parking lot with the students?
Pardon me?
Address the bus situation now?
Yes, this would look to address the bus situation that we see there. That's nose to tail all the way around the 4 corners of the parking lot.
One other point I wanted to make real quick before we moved on. On the new elementary school at Green Giant Road, I think we've said it before, but we ought to, again, give a shout out to the town of Middletown, because back in the day, when there was some annexations and development going on, the town secured that 30 acres for the school district for free. And so we did not have to pay for that 30 acres. And if anybody knows what land is selling for these days, that's a big savings for us. And so we, again, ought to thank the town and acknowledge that.
Yeah, that was a big piece. I mean, what that kind of delayed us previously was some of the road conditions out there, but now with the developments that are going out there by that would relieve some of our cost with the road conditions out there, because the roads are going to be improved because of the development that's going on out there.
When you have 2 different capital asks, the timelines are different, right? So if we were to go forward with the Waters parking lot, what's the timing in which that project would be completed if it's 100% locally funded?
So 100% locally funding allows us to have leadway on when we start that project. It's currently on the books to start fiscal year 2025, right? So that would be the first project we see moving in this referendum.
Okay. Are there other questions on the capital piece? Okay.
We'll come back to this. I know we want to see what the operational side of this is and all that, and so we can vote on moving forward with this. Okay, overview of the operational focus areas. Much of this is going to be reviewed, but I just think it's important for anyone from the public that may just be joining to hear some of this conversation. And then I'll show some models and open up the questions. So really, this is in 4 key buckets: recruitment and retention, which is our educator compensation, and also money that we need for growth. I've mentioned this several times. We grow about 50 to 60 employees each year. Operational expenses, that would be associated with growth, which would be curriculum resources and stuff for refreshment on our performing and visual arts. Safety and security would be to fund constables at every campus. I will give the caveat to this. We are currently funding outside the part that was supported in the 2019 referendum, which was a constable on every campus. When we voted to move to a constable on at every school, that's funded out of currently the safety and security grant that we receive. I've mentioned this too, that it's that safety and security grant at different times has gone and come depending on the times. The other part of this is a weapons detecting system. We would put that on every one of our artificial intelligence would be on every one of our camera feeds. Technology, we've been funded for one-to-one devices, 6th through 12th grade, 6th through 8th in the 2016 referendum, and 9th through 12th in the 2019 referendum. This would allow us to fund it from K to 12, one-to-one devices. We currently have funded that due to COVID through our COVID money, which is going to run out and has to be spent. Also, additional hardware needs that go along with growth and a cybersecurity piece of this is part of this ask. So the pieces of that recruitment and retention, we all know that our teachers and our staff is what makes this district a great district. We see on average a gap in our pay as with the pay of the rest of Newcastle County. This would help. This will not close the gap. This will shrink the gap between us and the rest of Newcastle County. That's a 36-cent ask, which represents $10 million that would go towards that bucket. Talk to this piece of it. This would fund the 8 additional constables that are currently funded out of the state or the safety and security grant. That's 1.78 cents, about $500,000. This is the weapon detections I talked about. Again, this is 1.79 cents, $500,000 for all 3,000 of our streams. The curriculum resources, that's delivered through an online platform, the licenses and things like that as we continue to span. The consumable materials that we hand out for those, and then for our immersion program, as it continues to grow, and when I mean grow, it grows by grade levels each year. Next year we'll be at the high school. Performing and visual arts, that ask is 0.6 cents. That's instrument repair and replenishment. Visual art equipment and supplies, and then a replacement cycle for our middle school and high school auditorium audio and visual systems. This is the one-to-one refresh that I spoke to, which is K to 5, 1.89 cents. It's the hardware needs. And what's included in that, just under a penny. Our cybersecurity needs, just under 0.6 cents. Any questions on those?
What's the sum total of all those cents?
All that, if we went all in, was 11.5 cents. Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. On the teacher recruitment retention piece was 36 cents. I'm sorry, it's 10.5 cents. If we went all in, it'd be 46.5 cents all in.
So the rest of it is 10.5.
Correct. Thank you for.
In the 30.
Yeah. So this model that we're showing is 36 cents. This is just for the, and I don't say just because I think this is the most important part of it, is for our educator compensation, teacher recruitments part at 36 cents. You can kind of see here on the model, this is, it goes, the green line that goes across here, the second green line down, it won't go on the screen. I'll have to do like Keith does, come up here and point at this thing. This line here, you can see that's the recruitment and retention or the educator compensation piece. So that's the line that you're looking at with that 36 cents on that. A key part of this, as I said, or as we've talked about previously, is the end of year carryover balance. We need to be in this range of about 3.4 million to 3.7 million by the end of year 3. So this is all in, and we're not recommending all in. This would be if we went all in. You can see the recruitment and retention lines here. And then these are the lines for safety and security, operational growth, and technology. So you see those lines have been added in. And then our carryover is between that 3.4, 3.7 that we need to be as we move forward after year 3. This is the model that the district leadership has recommended. We went through and we looked at some of the things. We kept recruitment and retention the same at the 36 cents. We reduced some of the safety and security numbers. So we took out constables in year 1, funding constables in year 1, because we're pretty confident that the grant's going to be funded this year, the way it's looking. We reduced the operational growth number, and then we reduced the technology number some. So we took those numbers down, and that gets you to the 36 cent ask for teacher recruitment and retention, and then get you to the 7 cents on the other pieces of this. And you can see that gives you the carryover balance here that we need to go move forward. The last part of this, someone asked for a 39.9 cent model at last board meeting that we discussed this. So we're showing a 39.9 cent model here, kept the recruitment and retention piece the same, and we did safety and security, and we did technology here. And then that gives you the carryover you see there that we need. Any questions, comments, motions?
So of course we'll have questions, and I think we will probably just need to have a general discussion before we start making motions, but that's up to our chair. On the 7 cent versus 10.5 cent all in, so we'll put the teacher retention and recruitment to the side. I'm always fond of the statement, an army travels on its stomach, which was Napoleon's way of saying you got to take care of your troops. We've got to take care of our teachers and our administrators and our staff and everybody else. Inflation has just ravaged people, and so I'm not going to quarrel about that. You got to do it. But on the 7 cent recommendation, that is still including the Zero Eyes additional cameras, right?
That's correct. It's a slower roll-in of Zero Eyes, and it's a little less number on there. Tom, if you want to talk to, or Eric, one of you guys want to talk to those
But it
numbers.
doesn't include any money for the arts.
It does.
So the 43 cent, your question is the 43 cent, the additional 7 cents, what that includes. So what we did with that model is we said, instead of $500,000 in additional costs for Zero Eyes, we would roll that out slower. We'd roll that out, and we'd cap out at $350,000 at the end of 3 years. So we would start out by funding a third of it, and then go to 2/3 funding. So really, what we're talking about is, in the first year, $115,000 in costs. Second year, $234,000 in costs. And then when we get to the third year, we'd be at the maximum that we'd spend on that technology, which would be $350,000. So we try to find ways, which Tom could probably speak more to, we try to find ways to be efficient and not put that technology in every camera, but in the ones that would be most impactful.
high. Thank you. The number is still high. I thought the last meeting we talked about offsetting that safety and security expense based off of a grant. So I think you just said that the second year would be 230 or 260. So that's still a delta of a little over $500,000. So what makes up that then?
So,
Makes up the difference?
so the difference you see there from 115 to 748, 594 is the constables would be back in that number.
Correct.
Oh, so you're going to swap them back out?
Yeah, we bring them back in with that. Now,
But that's assuming that we are going to assume that cost?
right, if we took on that cost, that's correct. So here's,
Well, we'd be
So is there no
hedging.
confidence in the grant?
Well, that's right, we'd be hedging.
there's two ways to handle this. And so, right, we'd be hedging on the grant.
Yeah.
We're
That's
hedging on the grant in
concern.
year one. Is it going to be there in year two? So
Year one is an election year.
right. So in the past, like, so last, well, 2019 referendum, we went out for a per penny amount on the capital side of the referendum. When we got to the point where we needed to do bonds, we realized that we didn't need the per penny amount that we had got approved to increase to. So we didn't increase that full amount. So on this, if we get the year, there's two ways you can handle this. When you get to this year, FY26, you can say when you get to that tax piece that we're not going to increase for that, whatever that amount is. We've decided we're not going to increase because you vote on that increase. You get approved to go to a certain amount, but you can vote to go under that amount. You can do that, or you can use that 500,000 and put it into reserves as you move forward and push out your next referendum. That would be a board decision on that if you get the grant. Those are two other ways you could handle that at that point.
It seems like the confidence in the grant has shifted a little bit from our last meeting. So maybe that's what I think is kind of shifting my thought process right now, because in FY26, as I said, that delta is still pretty significant. And so to bring it back in, so it feels like there isn't a savings on the expense side at all, because you're just going to swap it out.
Well, the savings in year one where you don't have it in there in the grant, or have the grant in there, you're counting on the grant
Yeah.
moving forward.
So Toshiba, my understanding is there's not a lot of confidence. I have confidence, but I'm an optimist. There's not a lot of confidence that this grant will be around forever.
Yeah.
And so the theory is, let's put it in the referendum now and have that money. The problem I have with that, and I've said this at a number of meetings, is we don't need that money right now, right? I mean, right now we are getting the grant. We have every reason to think that in 2024, an election year, at a minimum, that grant will still be there. What will happen after 2024? We can all try to prognosticate. I never try to prognosticate that far ahead. Politics is
I
impossible
guess that's my
enough.
point.
But that's
So-
why Matt's saying we can adjust it when we adjust. when we
So,
vote
well,
on it.
so that's the first time that that's been mentioned at a board meeting, that as far as I know, but,
It is the first time.
no, but it's a
And I'm
good
sure some
point.
people are going to be upset with me for saying that out loud, but yeah.
No, it's a good point. So that would give us the flexibility if the grant money were to go away, but if the grant money doesn't go away, I'm looking at you, Tom Pullman, then we don't tax for something we don't need.
Or we don't double dip.
Yeah, well, and I guess that's my point. So if it's not there, let's not then turn around and add it back in.
Well, so the only observation that I think Matt is making is if we put it in with kind of the understanding that we won't implement basically 500,000 is 2 cents, right, Eric, roughly? A little less than 2 pennies?
1 point, yeah.
So we would agree that even though the referendum authorizes a max increase of 43 cents, we would only go to 41, no,
It was 41 point.
yeah, 41.9 or 42.1, whatever gets us to the, that leaves that grant out. But then if the grant goes away in subsequent years, we could increase slightly to make up for that loss.
To just be 100, because I want to make sure you understand this correctly. In year FY25, we would need that full 7 cents because we're not including the constables in FY25. But in FY26, when we vote on that budget in June or July, I guess, is when we vote on the budget. June. Whenever we vote on that budget, we could say we don't need the 1.78 or 79 cents at that point because the grant's there.
That continues to shift the
And is that
responsibility to
because
the
we're
board.
well, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I just want to understand the financials then, because the other line items, the operational growth and technology, are staying constant in year one and year two. So if we're taxing at the full 7 cents in the first year, fiscal year 25, where's that extra money going? Are we banking that for the future, Eric?
So part of the issue is the reason for a model in the first place is that expenses are going up over time, revenue's going up slightly over time, but at some point, expenses outpace the revenue. And so when you go to referendum, you're setting the revenue line above the expense line for a period of time that you're going to have a surplus that's going to help boost you through a period where you're going to be, as we are this year, in a deficit spending situation. So it's not easy for me to sit here and say, if we just cut 1.7 cents from the number, we're going to be fine, because it's all factored into what's going to happen over a 3-year period. It's not as simple as that.
Well, but it's got to be simple enough in the sense that if we, first off, as long as the grant's there, I don't think we should be putting in the referendum. We're asking people to pay taxes for something that we're getting funded in a different way. And I understand that the grant could go away because there's no long-term 20-year commitment to it or anything.
But as we add constables, we don't know if the amount of the grant covers the number of constables we're adding to, right? I'm just,
No, but my
There's a
point
portion
is,
of it that might
but
go
we're- but
uncovered
right,
by
but
the
this
grant.
500,000 is to cover the constables that we've hired, that we've been paying by the grant. If we need to hire more constables, we're gonna have to find a different way to pay them anyway, because this money, if the grants go away, won't pay for extra constables. So my point is, if we're gonna say to folks, we don't need the money right now, but give us the authority in case the grant goes away, I could get behind that. But if we're going to say, oh, the first year we're going to tax you for it, and then in the future we might reduce the rate or we might not be able to, that's not the same thing. Either we're putting this in the referendum and giving ourselves the discretion not to tax for it because the grant money continues, or we're just putting it in the referendum period, and geez, if the grant money continues, we've got extra found cash, or we're not putting in at all, and we'll just roll the dice until the next referendum and see if we can get through to the next referendum.
I think I'm going to answer one part of that question because and I think I've shared this. The concern we have is if we don't have it as part of the referendum and the grant goes away, we can't just recover that. Like, we won't find out until June. Sometimes you don't find stuff out till June 30th. In our budget, we have to roll with the next budget that we don't have $500,000 plus to just then transition over into paying constables. So that's why we have that in there. Eric, I saw you were going to answer the other part of that question.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the model here. If we take the constables out and we assume if the state funds this perpetually, we can lower the rate from, instead of 43 cents, it could be 41.75 cents. So we lower it a penny and a quarter, 1.25 cents. You have to keep in mind with the math is that one is revenue's going up each year. So the per penny amount shifts each year. We've been seeing a $10,000 increase per year in our per penny revenue. The other thing is that you're capturing some revenue in year one when you don't intend to use any of that revenue to pay for the constables. So it's adding to the surplus that's then used for the next 2 years to handle that cost.
So
the answer is a drop of 1.25 cents for that.
You're saying for this number here, as we go out, right?
Well, what I'm saying is that if we adjust the number from 43 to 41.75 and we take the constable line out, that we're still, the carryover stays in the range we need it to stay at.
Okay, so I'm looking at the presentation that Matt just walked through again real quick. And on additional constables, it says the estimated cost is 1.78 cents.
Right.
So we're raising, or if we decide to do this, and that's still a big if in my mind, but if we do this, part of the rate increase would be 1.78 cents for to take, essentially remove any doubt about future grants and be indifferent to future grants, because now we'll have that built into our tax rate. But so why wouldn't it be the case that if we get the grant money, we assume we'll get it for this coming fiscal year, and then we get it for the next fiscal year. If we have said here that it's 1.78 cents for those constables, why can't we just reduce the tax rate by 1.78 cents?
Okay. Because one is that it's not 1.78 cents next year, right? Like we've already said in the recommended model that we're not even spending money next year. So the revenue that we're trying to capture over a 3-year period is a different type of stream than the expenditures that we're talking about. What we said was $500,000 was 1.78 cents, right? That's 1 year, but that per penny changes each year as the community grows and we get more assessed property value. So that's the reason why those numbers don't line up the way they do.
But let's pretend for a moment that the majority leader and the minority leader, all the leaders of the General Assembly and OMB and the governor are watching YouTube. That'd be great. And they sent us a letter. They sent Matt a letter tomorrow saying, you guys are really agonizing over constables, but rest assured, we're going to include them at least for the next 5 years. They'll get paid by us. So in other words, we didn't have to worry. We're not going out, if we go out to a referendum and again, it'll be presumably in less than 5 years. At that point, could we reduce the ask by 1.78 cents? Because we're showing a 1.78 cents just to cover constables. And if we knew they were covered, we wouldn't have to ask for that at all, right?
Okay, so now you're building in something to a model that I was not prepared for because I'm looking to try to get us 3 years out. I don't know, I can tell you that 1.78 cents isn't going to mean a whole lot 3 years down the road when, as you see when you look at any of the charts, what we're predicting when you add in the step increases, the increases in additional teachers and things like that, pay raises, things like that,
But now you're mixing apples and oranges. In other words, if we're saying we need 1.78 cents because that's going to go to the constables, and now we know the constables issue and it's a hypothetical.
But the 1.78 cents is one, we're trying to give you a number that says $500,000 is equivalent in today's world of 1.78 cents.
But you want us
In
to
a
give the
model
community a number.
for the revenue to try to get us to a point 3 years down the road to where we're in a comfortable place. It's not the same thing.
Well,
One is because you're talking about $1 million in costs, right? Because we're funding for a 3-year period of time, we're funding it for 2 years, not 3 years. So the value of that is 1.25 cents.
yeah, so we're not funding, so we didn't fund the 1.78 cents in FY25 out of
Oh, okay,
constables.
right. Okay, so the 1.78 cents assumes we go with the full 10.5 cent increase.
Correct.
So since we're shrinking that, then the 1.78 number goes down. Okay,
Yes.
I got it. Okay, that makes sense. It's all how you explain it.
I apologize.
No, I got it. Okay.
Are there any other discussions, or does anybody want to make a motion?
Do you want to, you had a question about operational growth. I don't know, or the arts and things like that. Do you want to share what's in that 500,000? So
My main question is, a portion of that is consumables, yes? A portion of that is when we talk about the arts piece and the curriculum piece. I know that I just want to make sure, we've heard about it before, but we're talking about it in public, that the consumable materials costs. and that's gone up. Like, I know that science curriculum consumables, can you say that information that I know we covered it in a workshop, but since we're trying to be as transparent as possible with the community, I think it's important to realize that when we have arts programs that have consumable materials like an art class, how that cost has gone up and how it hasn't been revisited, and the same with science materials.
Sure. So are you talking about scenario 3 if we go down to the 500?
Yes.
Okay. So if we look at the 500,000, then we're looking at approximately 330,000 for the first ask, which is our curriculum resources, which was the first slide. And then the second would be the arts, which is $170,000. That's how we would budget accordingly. Now, all of our students need to have access to our core curriculum. So I had shared that last time that we would have to use our expenses and budget to make sure that everyone has access to core curriculum. However, there are additional curriculum resources that we use, supplemental things, online resources, and that's where we would have to budget and consider what to do with those funds. For example, we might have an online subscription that's per pupil. We keep growing, so we have to pay for more student licenses. We might have to consider at the K-2 level not having some of those resources and starting them maybe in 3rd grade instead. And that way we would be able to cut down on the budgeting there. With the arts, we have replenishment, repair, things that need to happen, of course. We are budgeting the $170,000 as expected from scenario 2 as well.
And just to revisit, when we had the school board meeting where we talked about all of our outcomes and things we wanted to work on, it did rely heavily on curriculum resources and materials.
Absolutely. So our teachers need the proper resources to be able to do what they need to do in the classroom, and for our students to be successful, have the materials and resources that they need.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, comments, concerns? Discussion?
What if we just took the software piece out entirely on that 43 cents? Do you know how much that would save us?
If we took out what?
Just the software piece, the Visi Eyes or whatever it's called.
Zero eyes?
Zero Eyes. Zero Eyes, Visi Eyes. I need new glasses. If we just, Eric, is it possible for you to figure out what the savings would be just taking out the Zero Eyes piece
So I'm removing 0 eyes from the,
from the 43-cent model?
so I'm putting back the constables.
No, leave the 43-cent model as is, just take out Zero Eyes. In other words, is it 2/10 of a penny or 3/10 of a penny or half a penny? Or, you know, Shark, why are you making my job so hard?
What?
It's not worth it. No, maybe. I don't, personally.
Richard, are you trying to get to a certain number all in?
Beg your pardon?
Are you trying to get to a certain number all in?
I don't think we need the Zero Eyes for the balance of our cameras. And so I'm curious, if we took that out, what that number would be. So we've got the recommendation of 43 cents from our administrative team. And I don't think that money is well spent as compared to other things we could spend it on. There's a lot of other things, if I had $500,000 or, I'd like to spend money on.
But that might be a decision we have to let our community make. I mean, I feel
Just-
like parents given the choice for a safety and security measure.
But we're only presenting them with one number. And
Just to be clear, so there's no, remember, this wasn't the full $500,000 model. This was a phase-in 115.
No, I know. That's why, I
350.
mean, if you come back to me and say it's only 1/10 of a penny, then I'm going to probably say it's a rounding error at that point. But if you come back to me and say, no, it's 2 cents, then we ought to talk about it more.
So literally, if I swap out,
Don't swap out anything. Just take out Zero
no, but
Eyes.
we had 43 cents. Constables were in there. We took constables out, we ran the numbers, and it was 41.75 cents.
Right.
The constables are back in there, and you take out 0 eyes, it's 41.75 cents.
So 1.25 cents for Zero Eyes, 1.25 cents for the constables under that model.
Right. Because once again, 0 eyes, you're talking about the recommendation by the cabinet was $350,000 a year. However, it's not. It's
No, I get it.
It
It
cycles
builds up over time.
right.
Any other questions or things you would like us to look at?
Is there a motion?
Madam President, I'll make a motion to go with the 2024 referendum scenario number 3, cabinet recommendation of 43 cents plus the construction piece, and then let the community decide if that's acceptable to them.
Is there a second? The motion was to go with the referendum scenario 3, which is the 43 cents with the addition of the capital piece as presented. Is that
So-
correct, Mr. Abrams?
That's correct.
So that would be a 47-cent total.
Well, it'd be 3 separate questions, right?
It could be 3 separate questions.
2 on the
Yes,
capital.
And one on the operational.
correct.
Is there a second?
If the motion fails for lack of a second, I'll make a motion.
You're gonna be kidding me.
I'll make a motion that we approve we go to referendum for the 43-cent model as presented without the additional zeroize, and with, I'm going to say, the understanding that if the grant money continues for the constables, that the board in the future then reduce the tax rate to the extent that it can in light of the grant monies continuing. So it would be a 41.75 cents, right? Ask with just the proviso that if the constable grants continue, then we would reduce the tax rate to the extent we can to, since we wouldn't be incurring that operating cost would be coming from grants.
So Richard, I think, before we vote on that, I think I just need a point of clarity. So you said you said 43 cents as is, but taking zero eyes out. It's as is inclusive of zero eyes.
Well, what I said was take the 43, what I meant to say, if I wasn't clear, was the motion would be for the 43-cent model as presented, less
There's that
zero eyes.
operative word. Okay.
Less the zero eyes, and with the understanding and flexibility that I think we have anyway, as Matt made the excellent point, that if the grant money does continue beyond 2024 and it affords us an opportunity to reduce the tax rate, then we would exercise that
Well,
flexibility.
if
We could
the
exercise that
grant money
flexibility. We can't.
continued, would you be open to using the money for zero eyes?
No.
Let's go back to the first. The
But I guess-
superintendent of the school district that we fully represent the community has made a recommendation. I get that there's pieces in here that I don't like, you don't like, and we all don't like. It is their recommendation. We're going to go to a referendum in 7 or 8 weeks. I'm going to go with the cabinet's recommendation for what they want, tell the community what they want. The community says yes to what they want. I'll support the district, I'll support the community. If they do not do the job to sell the referendum and the community comes back and says, no, all bets are off, everything's on the table, we'll hack away. But at some point, the district should have the right to present to the community everything they want to do. It is our job to hold them fiscally responsible, financially responsible, all the way to the nth degree. But at some point, we have to have faith in our district to do the right thing.
Well,
I
normally.
agree with you, Mr. Abrams, but I can't second the original motion.
Yes, you can.
I can second a motion.
Well, that motion failed, so I've made a motion now that's waiting for a second.
Yeah, but I think I'm struggling with your motion, Richard, only because you're using language as is, so that means as it's presented, less zero eyes. So then if you're removing zero eyes, then that potentially shifts the overall number.
It does.
As Eric.
It shifts it down to 41.
So then that's not as
Okay,
is, so we need to be
I don't have
clear
a
on-
second on Richard's motion, and I don't have a second on Norm's motion. Is there a third motion?
I'll make a
But
motion
wait a
that
minute,
we,
so we just need to be clear on what the number is. I think that's what that's what I'm struggling with right now. You can't say as is and then have amendments like thereafter, because that's technically not as is.
I'll make a motion that we go out to referendum at 41.75 cents. That number is derived from taking the 43 cent recommendation and subtracting out zero eyes. Does that satisfy you in terms of clarity?
Is there a second for Mr. Forson's motion? Hearing none. Is there a third motion?
Madam President, I'd like to remake my motion again. I'd like to make a motion for the 2024 referendum scenario number 3, cabinet recommendation as presented, with the caveat that every time we do a referendum, stuff comes, stuff goes, stuff in curriculum falls away and it gets added, different costs come, different costs go. We are allotting them a certain amount of money to operate this district. I believe they've asked for a price. Let the community decide. If they say no, then we come back and take everything off the table, but let the community decide. That's my motion. It's not, and I don't want to spend 40 cents either. I get it. But this district, it is a crossroads. We cannot hire people. We need at some point to put our foot down, make the case to the community. If the community comes back and says no, they say no, we go back to the board. Or we
Well,
come
and
back
the
to us
majority
and
of the ask is for our teachers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think we all agree, everyone in this room and listening agree certainly wholeheartedly to the 36 cents. It's the difference. I'm sorry, Norm, I think your motion, and correct me if I'm wrong, is 43 cents as presented by the cabinet?
With the addition of the capital
in
portion.
the capital piece.
Oh, all in on the capital side?
But we need a bus lot for our buses. So I mean, yes.
Well, I thought we were making two motions, one on the operating.
I'll take mine back.
operation.
We'll do the capital piece later.
Yeah.
My motion is just for,
The operational piece at 43 cents.
yes, that's correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second that, Norm.
All those in favor vote by
Well,
saying
can we have a
aye.
little discussion here first?
Are there any questions, comments, or concerns on the motion?
So I don't think the money on zero eyes is well spent. And as one of the guardians of the fiscal purse here, and I get that people want it. I understand why they want it. But as has been said many times, we have limited resources. And if I had to choose how those resources were being spent, I would not spend them, and I would vote against spending them. And if it came up in a line item budget, I would want to strike it from the budget.
As a parent
So-
with two children in the school district, I can't cut back on safety and security.
We're not cutting back. This is adding something that I would submit that we don't necessarily need. And it's not.
Would it have helped with the incident that happened at Odessa High today to have this kind of technology?
Possibly, unless that was fully conceived, then it would not.
We're already using it in some cameras, right? And so far as I know, no other district in the state is using this, correct?
And Richard, have you ever stopped at wanting to be like every other district?
You say you don't care what other districts are doing.
I know, look, and I stand by that. I really don't care what other districts are doing, but I don't think this is something that we need to be doing. And
I'm
so,
not saying this in an arrogant kind of way, but districts are calling me following our lead. And unfortunately, we've had some incidents where we've had to respond. And I don't think we've been excessive in what we've done. To me, at the guidance of our safety and security task force, it's been a reasonable and calculated response. And we've added it on cameras now, but I try really hard, I do. But trying to guess at what camera to put it on is a lot of weight on my shoulders. So that's where sort of the ask comes from, where we can expand it and get on more camera streams as opposed to me trying really hard and keeping my fingers.
How many cameras do we have in the district?
Right now, it's, so it's not on, so cameras have multiple streams. So we've put it on certain streams around our stadiums and gyms. So it's only probably about a third of the cameras that we have that this technology is based on right now.
So a third of the cameras in the district right now are already
Approximately
a third.
well, camera streams.
I think the number in here is 3,000. Did I read that? Part of the proposal? Yeah, for more than 3,000 streams is what the proposal includes.
That was at full 500, or that was at
Fully
full
funded.
10 and a half cents.
Yeah.
So I don't know, is it still 3,000 streams at that?
Well, so what we can do is we can look at the cameras and the different streams that come off the camera, and does every stream on every camera need zero eyes? Probably not. But we need to get on more of the streams than we're currently on, or currently can afford.
So currently we have a motion on the floor, a motion seconded. Is there other discussion on this item?
But, so, just to add to that piece though, so the streams, if it's not 3,000, but more than the third that we have now, what do you guesstimate the number of streams would be as it relates to cost? Then are we looking at an adjustment in cost?
Well, so I'm offering that versus not having it at all,
Okay,
right? So I guess I'm asking for
something as opposed to nothing.
right, exactly.
Fair.
A step in the right direction,
Yeah.
Have
or a
we-
step in that
I'm just
direction.
curious, have we run any drills or have we tested zero eyes at all ourselves?
Several times the company comes down, and we've had some false alarms with sort of water guns and kids just playing around. But it's cutting edge, state of the art, and the whole premise, and I don't want to, when I listen to the debate, I worry that we're getting away from what the premise is. The premise is for weapons detection that if detected, it gets help on the way to resolve the scenario before, potentially the first shots are fired.
So it's a proactive
It's
approach.
proactive. It's proactive.
I think
And to be
having a
clear-
student in the district, I can't move away from that. I mean, obviously, I'm not just here for my own kid, but for all the children. Just thinking about the scenario that this technology could be helpful, I surely don't want to be on the other side of it, of what we should or could have done to have a different outcome. So
It's for the 13,087 children in our district.
thanks, Michelle, for the.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns, or all of those in favor vote by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi. Hold on a second.
Those opposed?
I'm going to vote aye because I'm going to roll over to Norm's position, which is to say, we'll put it out there. And
Yeah.
I mean, we should not kid ourselves. This is a big ask. A lot of it is very, very important. I worry that we have pushed this a bridge too far on some of this stuff, and it's going to come back to bite us. I hope that's not the case, and I'll certainly work hard to get the referendum passed. If you look at our assessment base and you look at the way we've handled our finances over the years I've been on the board, I think we've done a great job, and we deliver a lot on a shoestring. So I'm going to vote yes. I'm not happy about having to vote yes. There's some tweaks I'd make, but I recognize that I'm not a benevolent dictator, and that I'm just one of five up here. And so I will work with my fellow school board members and the administration to pass this referendum at 43 cents on the operational side.
What did you say? Just said aye. Motion carries, but I would like to comment. I appreciate your remarks, and just like if we all feel the same way as Mr. Abrams, this is an important ask of our community, and the community needs to say yes. We, the five of us, in my opinion, as one of five, stand as the bridge between the district and the community. So we are taking the district's ask to the community, but the community needs to support it.
I think
And we will work hard, the 5 of us, to support you in that.
that's one of the things, like, is so important that the 5 and all of us are on the same page and supporting and moving forward, because this isn't passed with one person or one thing. It needs all of us working together and working all of our resources in order for us to get out there to our constituents, to our community, to support. And as we've mentioned, a huge part of this is for our staff, and we need their support as well.
So, Madam
Yeah,
President,
capital
going back to the capital, I think Norm wanted to make a motion. Norm? Did you want to make a motion
The
on the
capital
capital
piece?
side now?
Portions.
Yes.
I make a motion on the capital side of our 2024 referendum, be 4 cents.
And for the record, that'll consist of 2 separate questions, though. So one is the schools, the other is the fully funded parking lot.
Correct.
I have a motion by Mr. Abrams and a second by Ms. DeWitt to approve the capital portion of the referendum at 4 cents, which, as Mr. Forson highlighted, will appear in 2 questions, the 3 buildings and then the separate funded parking lot project that's very overdue needed. Any other questions, comments, or concerns on this motion? All of those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
So we have one other piece to this, and I appreciate your support as we look to move forward. The ballot language is on the structure of the ballot language. We have to have the ballot language submitted by November 3rd, which is a very tight timeline for us. So if we could work that ballot language out tonight where we're at a point of comfort, it would be very much appreciated and relieve some stress off of us. So we have samples, one being that if there was one question for the operational side of that, so we're looking at the operational side of the ballot language. And then the second one being if there was 2 questions on the operational side of it.
If you had 2 questions, you would be breaking it down into recruitment and retention and then everything else?
That's one model, yes.
And keeping it at 1 question just highlights everything that it covers.
Correct. I was at one point thinking 2 questions.
I think if we
but I
have
would
2
go with
questions
1
for capital,
questions.
I would go with 1 question.
Yeah, I would recommend 1 question on
Yes.
the operational side.
Do you need a vote on that or just direction?
Just direction.
I
As we submit the way.
think our motion was for 43
Yeah,
cents
so
on the
that's-
operational side, so that's just 1 question.
Okay, so just so you guys are kind of aware of the process, we send the language to the Department of Elections. They have 10 days to look at the language and, change some verbs and things like that on it. And then we go back and we go back and we change it to what they want the language to be, and then they finally approve it, and then we have to post notice and things like that. So with your approval, we would start submitting our language to the Department of Elections.
Do you need us to vote on the language?
No, we're just
Okay.
showing it to you, ready to
And
go.
what you're showing us, though, this is just on the operational question that you
Correct.
showed us, okay?
The capital
Capital is what
question
it
is the
is.
same,
Right.
as we did last time, just 2 separate questions.
Right. All right.
All right.
So with going forward with this, the district is going to do its due diligence in educating people on why we're asking for this. And I encourage anyone in the community who has questions or concerns to reach out to us and ask for clarification. Or if you see misinformation in the community, reach out to the district for clarification. Moving on in the agenda, I have the establishment of the upcoming meeting dates. The Financial Advisory Committee is scheduled to meet November 7th, 2023 at 6 o'clock in the Finance Conference Room of the Tonio Marcio Building. The next regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting is Tuesday, November 14th at 7 o'clock. And if needed, we have a meeting scheduled Friday, November the 11th at noon. I'm sorry, November the 3rd at noon. For anything else going forward with the referendum. And I think that's all for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and good night.
Aye.